And then somebody, I don't even remember who it is, said to me, well, maybe if you get married, you'll be in a commuter marriage. And I was like, what's that? And I'm actually a marriage and family therapist. You'd think I would know.
Mm-hmm.
So I started looking into it, researching it.
You're listening to Get Your Marriage On, the fun and spicy podcast bringing you new tools and fresh ideas so that you can be the sexiest couple you know.
Do you or your spouse live apart for part of the time? How do you keep your marriage strong when you may not see each other every day? And can distance really make the heart grow fonder? If you're wondering these things too, you're going to love this episode. Roughly 4 million American couples live apart for some of the time, whether it's for military, pilots, artists, traveling salespeople, medical professionals, or for other reasons. Elaine, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and her husband Abe found themselves in a commuter marriage through some pretty unique circumstances, which you'll hear about. They help other couples in similar situations maintain a strong relationship while living apart. They are the co-host of the Love is in the Air podcast, which features an airplane as a logo. Get it? Love is in the air with an airplane. Anyway, together they have 5 children. You're going to love this episode. Elaine and Abe, it's such an honor to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Dan.
And it's great. We coordinated time zones and everything.
Right.
Elaine, you're in California. Abe, you're in Texas. And I'm in Utah. So like the 3 of us span 3 time zones. This is really good.
That's pretty awesome. We're covering it. That's right.
Exactly.
I like to start my podcast with a little bit of foreplay. So I wanted to ask you, Elaine and Abe, what is something funny you remember from your honeymoon?
Oh, that's good. Well, I would have lots of memories from my honeymoon. I mean, our honeymoon.
I was there.
Oh, yeah, you were there too. I think probably the one to me that, I don't know how funny it was. It was just so fun. We went to Jamaica for our honeymoon. And what was fantastic on our honeymoon is that there was kind of this private beach that we went to real near our resort. And every day it pretty much started raining around noon. And then we'd have this chance to go back and take a nice nap and connect and everything. But one day I'm standing like in the beach and it starts raining. And Abe was so cute. He goes, hold on one second. And he went to and got me a pina colada and said, I got to hold it and kind of think of like, he goes, well, do you like standing in the rain and a pina colada? What's the song again? How does it go?
Yeah. If you like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain.
Yeah. And the answer is yes. I loved it. It was fantastic.
What's even funnier about that is that it seemed like a really special, cute moment. And we're like, and then I started to kind of play that song in my head. It's about a guy looking for someone else and the woman looking for someone else. And then they meet each other and go, oh, it's you. And no one's upset, even though they're both trying to cheat on each other. Right. But yeah, that honeymoon, that was so amazing in terms of just great spontaneous moments. And that was one of them. And that was a really cool memory.
That was super fun. And the answer is yes. I do enjoy pina coladas and getting caught in the rain.
Now, this is a second marriage for both of you, what I understand. Elaine, you're in California, and Abe, you're in Texas. And when you got married, you realized, you're established in your careers with your children and their friends. You decided, we're going to try to make this commuter marriage work. You live apart, but you're still married. So we have a lot of listeners that might be in military or with work, or for whatever reason, they're married, but they spend significant amounts of time apart. So I want to dedicate this podcast episode to them and how we can help them.
Right. Yeah. There's actually millions we've discovered through our own marriage. There's like 4 million Americans alone in commuter marriages. So it's any marriage where they're coping with consistent distance. And so it can be couples like us who have children from previous marriages, but it's also military, firefighters, musicians, scientists, like actors, anyone who has to kind of travel quite consistently. And there's different configurations. So some people have 2 homes like us. We have a home in Texas and in California. And then other couples, maybe like a pilot, would have 1 home and, maybe he spends a lot of time in hotels across the nation or the world. And so there's millions just in America and worldwide. I don't even know the stats, but But yeah, do you want to share, Abe, a little bit about how we started this whole thing?
Sure. Well, Elaine and I, our story is a long one. We knew each other when we were little in church, and then I was more of the rough and tumble, get out of my way kind of guy back then, as a 7-year-old or 8-year-old, and so Elaine didn't want anything to do with me at that point. And then we kind of went separate ways, middle school, high school, and didn't really know much about each other. And maybe said hi once or twice, and then there was a brief period where we worked together at 24 Hours Family Fitness back then.
Yeah.
And I had designs on her. Although I wasn't bold enough to actually ask her out, but I skirted around the issue quite a bit. And I think at that time she was talking to somebody else, her husband.
It was
her
actually my
soon-to-be
first husband I was talking to.
And so, that didn't happen. I was very upset about it. But again, and then, after 2 decades or so, I see that, I think we were Facebook friends, and then
Right.
and then something happened and you came back on Facebook, and then we became friends again. And then I saw her, I was like, oh my gosh, wow, and then I didn't know, I think I thought you were still married and you thought I was still married.
Right.
And then she had made a post about her divorce, and I was divorced. And so at the time I had a consulting business, and I reached out with the guys, let me help you with your marketing, even though I was really saying, I would really like to get to know you again, kind of thing. But there was a part of it too. And I think a lot of your people that are in distance will have that immediately in my mind, it's never going to work. I think she's beautiful. She seems amazing. I'm in Texas. She's in California. How would that ever work? And so I wasn't thinking anything really would come of it, but it did. And then when we finally had a conversation, we connected right away. And after the first, night of conversation, I thought, wow, I don't want to be without this person. And so I was already hooked, immediately. And that's how we connected. And, at the time, she had children that were just finishing high school and just starting high school. And I had boys that were just turning 10. And we knew, hey, this is going to be a challenge for us, but it's better that, we make the sacrifice for them.
And we didn't want to uproot them. We kind of felt like, one of the hardest parts about going through a divorce is obviously it's the ending of a marriage, which is very difficult. But what breaks your heart even more is just the loss that your children have. And so when Abe and I started talking, I mean, one of the things that made me fall in love with him is I knew he was never going to leave his kids, and I was never going to leave my kids. And so it was like, they don't need to make any sacrifices. We can make the sacrifices. So lo and behold, we started dating and flying back and forth and seeing one another. And then somebody, I don't even remember who it is, said to me, well, maybe if you get married, you'll be in a commuter marriage. And I was like, what's that? And I'm actually a marriage and family therapist. You'd think I would know. So I started looking into it, researching it, and lo and behold, it's a lifestyle that many people are living.
So what are the downsides of commuter marriage?
Oh, wow.
What do we have? How long is this show? Well, there's a lot of them. I mean, there's a lot of upsides and there's a lot of downsides. I mean, I think that the thing that we miss most, and in fact, we just talked about the other day, was, I was just there. And I was there from Friday to Monday. And we had an opportunity to sleep together every night, to wake up in each other's arms every morning. And that's the downside. You don't get to have the physical touch and intimacy and connection every day.
Yeah, I think the physical touch is the hardest part in it. And that includes sexual intimacy. But I would also even just say, there are times where I have a really rough week. And part of, having a tough week at work is you want to come home and just be held by your person, right? And that really does huge things for your mental health. And you miss that when you're coping with distance, whether it's short term or whether it's long term. So I would say that is the most difficult part for me, is not having the physical touch.
For sure.
What are the upsides of being in a commuter marriage?
Oh, well, I also get the bed to myself, and I can sleep like a starfish if I want, right? Sometimes it's nice to, I would say I mean, there's little things like that. Like sometimes it's just nice to have your own space. One of the things that I also really like is it allows me to really focus on my relationship with my children and my friendships and my work. And so I can really pour into those relationships and into those components of my life. And then when I am with Abe, then it's all about us and the romance. And so I would say the combination of getting to really pour into other relationships is my biggest benefit. But the other benefit is just like we have every time we travel to see each other every 2 to 3 weeks. There's always this build up and anticipation. So it kind of keeps the spark and romance really alive too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I can
yeah.
see that. How if you're together all the time, you kind of get accustomed. It
You're like,
becomes
you
ordinary.
again. No.
Yeah. Or it becomes ordinary. Now that you're like, there's that anticipation of seeing each other again.
Right. It gives you some of that. Yeah, that's kind of fun. I mean, we have our just everyday stuff too, because we connect. Gosh, we connect. How much do you think say we connect a day?
Oh, at least 10 times. I mean,
we text, we talk, we probably communicate more than even your average couple because we have to,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
exactly.
That's good. And maybe when you're together after being apart, the little annoyances or little arguments, whatever, kind of might fade into the background a little more
That's
because
true. You do
this time
tend
together is
to,
precious.
yes, you do. You
Exactly.
tend to let things go. Another fun thing too, and is what we often, and we will give a lot of advice to our own listeners on our podcast of what kind of the bread and butter of keeping a relationship with distance alive is we pour a lot into our dates at a distance.
Mhm.
So we have to be very creative and we have to have a lot of variety of like we have an online date scheduled for tonight. So like we put a lot of effort and creativity into that. And the reason for that is that you do get in a rut of just looking forward to seeing each other. So we have to get excited about our dates online just as much. So it's a ton of fun.
Well, so tell me your date ideas. Give me like 3 or 4 if you can,
Okay, sure.
or more.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Amy.
No, you go ahead. Well, we kind of have our go-to.
Sorry, that was someone knocking at my door.
That's so funny. That happens, right? Well, I'll go ahead and talk and you can deal with
Go
that.
ahead.
If you need. So I would say we have our go-to ones, Dan. So we have definitely like the Netflix one, like let's watch a movie. It's like 1, 2, 3, go. And then we like just automatically do it on the phone. So that's kind of happening every week. We'll watch a movie or show together, just like any couple would. But then one of our favorite dates is called Who Played It Best, and we coined it that, where we each pick a recipe. So we pick a recipe together. We put on our headphones. We cook and talk, and just
So you're
have
cooking the same
fun.
thing?
Same thing, same time. And we're talking about what we're cooking. We're talking about like, how are you doing? How I do it. But we don't show each other it until the very end. And we plate it. And then we take a shot of it and we send it to each other. And we also put it on our social media, and all of our friends and family vote for who played it best, California or Texas. And
Nice.
and we also have an online community. And so a lot of people get really into voting. And then we actually ended up even doing that as a double date with another couple in distance.
Mhm.
So we had 4 of us at one time. We had one person in Canada, one in Maryland, me in California, and you in Texas. And then we posted that and people were voting too. So that's a super fun one.
That's cool.
It's always done. It's rarely ever done on what the food looks like. It's usually
I know, right?
who has the
voting.
better looking drink or what the plate looks like. We're like, no, we want you to judge the food, not the plate.
Yeah, people always like say like, I like this plate better, and I
We're
like
what?
so funny.
It's great. Tell me more fun, creative date ideas you do while apart.
Well, I'll let you think about what your other favorite one is, honey. But my other favorite one is we go to a website called virtualvacations.us, I think. Virtualvacations.us. When you go there, Dan, it is so cool. There are videos of a walking tour of like, or a flying in tour, or like a driving around one of Italy, Greece, like all kinds of places in the world. And some of them are even live cams. So like you can actually, like there's one in Denmark where there's this beautiful like river and bridge where you can actually see people moving around in live action. So we will often coordinate either a cocktail or like a dinner related to that place. And it's kind of like, we're going to Italy tonight and it's almost like going on a tour together online. So
Right.
that's another favorite that we do.
And I'm pretty sure we saw someone get robbed on one of those camps.
Right.
Watch out for those pickpocketers.
We're like, hey, what just happened? Did that person just get robbed? Yeah.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that we do, and this also helps incorporate not just our connection, but our kids' connection. And so several times we have these Zoom meetings where we play online games together, and it's my kids and Elaine's kids, and we all get together as a family. And whether it's charades, or there's a game called Jackbox that you can like kind of see all together at once and play together, which is a lot of fun on your phones while you're interacting and interfacing. So that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's another really fun one. Yeah. And then maybe my other last favorite is we found this like haunted house one, which
That was fun.
It sounds kind of silly, but it's this whole like spooky website where it's almost like you read this portion of this kind of haunted house thing, and then you have to pick A or B, and then you go through this whole like little map together. And but Abe does all these funny voices. Can you give us do your voice that you do?
Oh man, I would have to depend on what it was, but it's somewhat, you open the door and inside lies the monster, silly stuff like that. But it reminds me of there's, that when they first had video games online, which was like the early 80s, and it's all text based.
Yeah.
Right?
Muds. Yeah.
Story. And then you're like, do you want to go left or do you want to go right? Or do you want to go?
Yeah.
So it's like that, but it seems cheesy, but when you're in an online or a distant relationship, whether it's commuter marriage or LDR, it's great to have that interaction. So you could do it kind of together.
Yeah.
And you make your choices together, and you have a glass of wine or something, and you kind of make a night of it. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So we do, I mean, some of them are really corny and silly, and they're things that you're like, you would never probably do that. But when you're in a distance, you don't want to just like watch a movie together every weekend. You want to have a variety of things. But we also do things like I just ordered us a new like devotion. We're going to read a devotion. We're going to start doing daily devotions. Like, so we actually read books together, even just by phone. So we have we're just like any other couple. Like, we have our times that, our go-to things we do all the time. And then we try to get creative and do different things too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you require it takes a little bit more cognitive concentration because of the technology barrier? Of course, thank goodness for Zoom and FaceTime and text messaging and email and everything, but still it requires a little bit more like it's easy to zone out probably.
It does. And that's the thing is like, it requires you to put some more effort and creativity into it. And we've kind of realized, but isn't that the way any marriage should be? Like, shouldn't we all be doing that? And so Abe and I are kind of like, we're going to make a commitment to doing this, even after we close the distance and we're living together.
Right. Although when we do watch like Netflix or some online streaming, the only cognitive aspect of it is to go, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. And we push play at the same time and we watch a movie.
But it's funny because we're kind of old school, because a lot of couples that we know in our community, they actually do it. There's a lot of, you can get to platforms where you can watch it together on your laptop and then see each other's face at the same time. But Abe and I are old school. We just push play and like.
Well, we've tried that in our defense, tried that several times and it hasn't worked.
It just hasn't been successful. Yeah.
I think Amazon Prime has their like watch party feature. Something
like
that.
And Netflix has Teleparty or something like that. So there's a lot of creative ways. Yeah.
How do you surprise each other while you're still apart?
Ooh.
Well, one thing, it's funny doing this, Dan, is that we've learned a lot from other people and from articles, and Elaine's done an amazing job about, doing a lot of the research behind a lot of this stuff. I just kind of come along for the ride. But what we started to notice is that, wow, we're coming up with a lot of great ideas and finding a lot of great ideas, but we're not really doing a lot of them. And so we're trying to start doing more of them. So What we started to do recently was to send each other little gifts,
Uh-huh.
like under $10, just fun things from Amazon throughout, the week, or, and it's not all the time, but it's just a surprise every now and then. And sometimes it comes after an argument or two. So
that's when
it's
I get
strategic at
that's
times.
when I get a flowers delivery, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. So I try not to do that all the time. I can build up that,
Well, and the other component I think is that it lends to the old romance of a marriage, is that we do spend a lot more time doing things like letter writing to one another.
Mhm.
And so, like, good old fashioned, like, letter writing in cursive with perfume on it. I often will send those to Abe when I'm just really, it allows me an outlet when I'm missing him to write him a letter. Or care packages is another really fun way to kind of like surprise each other. And Dan, I'm going to commit to you right now. There is going to be a day. I swear there's going to be a day he's going to get a knock on the door in Texas and I'm going to show up and I'm not going to tell him. I'm just going to fly there one day.
Yeah,
That'd be the best surprise of all.
Oh
Right?
yeah, we've heard those, and then we also heard of a story where both people had the same idea, and they went.
Yes.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yes. So
And
we
I'm
actually,
afraid, I'm a little nervous that may happen.
I
She might fly out to see
know.
me, I fly out to see her, and we go, "What happened?"
What
We
movie is
did-
that? Serendipity? Is that, or what?
Well, this is an actual couple, Dan. So we did a podcast episode on funny stories in distance, and a bunch of our listeners wrote in. And there was actually a couple. They're a younger couple, but they don't fly to see each other. They actually drive. They're about 3 hours away. And one weekend, they both said, "I'm going to go surprise him," and they ended up at each other's house.
Uh-huh.
3 hours distance. So then they had to like meet up somewhere halfway. Isn't that funny? So
That's
I felt
awesome.
like at the time it was not funny. At the
Yeah.
time, I'm sure they were probably so upset.
His flowers are wilted now, and
I
Oh.
don't know.
In many ways, COVID has probably made distance relationships a little easier because of the invention of like Uber Eats or DoorDash and other things like that. You can do things for each other because there's more services available for people that need delivery at home.
Right. They have said that the number of people even coping with distance has gone way up, especially even long distance relationships, just because of all that we have through the internet and social media and things like that. And with COVID, it was really funny because, we're seeing all these people scramble to learn how to connect online. And we're like laughing because we've been doing this for years. Right. So for us, it was kind of stuff we were already doing. Like it wasn't a huge problem. But what's super interesting about it, Dan, is that we didn't even realize it, that when we started our podcast, we walked into this whole movement actually called Love is Not Tourism, where there are many, many couples who, because of travel bans, because of COVID, when they're in international relationships, when one's in another country, that they haven't seen some of these people haven't even still seen each other, that it's been like a year and 18 months and they've been separated. So we didn't even realize we're both in the US. And so we had it pretty easy, but so COVID is in some ways made it really easy for a lot of people to connect, but for those poor international couples, it has made it very difficult. So that's sad.
Yep. I get emails like that too. One particular one, he's in a country with very strict lockdown rules and
Australia is one of them.
Cannot get back to his wife. And anyway, it can be heartbreaking if you can't adapt to it and learn how to work with that.
Right.
Well, one of the other things that was we actually found as a benefit, and that sounds horrible to say, of what the restrictions and all that kind of stuff, is that more employers have been open for working remote.
Yes.
You can actually stay at home and get work done. I was actually out on the business trip to San Diego when this whole thing happened. And I was just staying with Elaine for the weekend, but then it got serious and everything was locked down. And so I said, I'm going to stay here until it lightens up. And my company at the time was like, okay, everyone's staying home.
Yeah. So we got this unique little pocket of time within COVID where we got to spend like a couple months together. He eventually, he needed to be with his boys too, so he went back. But like, it was just a nice little reprieve for us,
Right.
That's great. All right. I'm just so curious. How do commuter marriage couples do sex?
Do sex. I like the way you said that.
Well, there's some diagrams and there's some puppetry involved.
I knew you'd have to say something like that. Well, yeah, it's funny because as a married couple, we need to express ourselves sexually, right? And so, how do you do that? So, yeah, Dan, I'll be honest with you. I never thought at 50 years old I'd be having phone sex, but here we are. And it's one of those things where, when you connect sexually when you're apart, I think it's just really important to also make a decision to keep that part of the marriage. And so a big part of for us is it's kind of an evolution, like we might be talking and saying I miss you and I want to be with you, and the next thing you're kind of saying I wish I could be holding you, and then suddenly the conversation starts to go into these descriptions of the ways that we'd like to be physically intimate. And so it's when you hear the term phone sex, it sounds so kind of like, I don't know, like it sounds
1-900 number.
exactly.
Uh-huh.
But it's really just more of a beautiful evolution of us kind of describing the ways that we would love to be with each other physically.
There's a sweetness to it, isn't there?
And it's actually really hot and sexy too. You know what I mean? So it ends up being like super fun. And then if we are, we are careful, like if we send sexy texts or selfies or things like that, we're just really careful. We use platforms that are safe and end-to-end encrypted and things like that, so that we don't, do anything that's gonna like make us regret it later.
Right. And I have an app for that too. It's called Just Between Us.
I know. I was seeing that. That's so awesome. And so you have end-to-end encrypted on that as well?
Yes, absolutely.
And that's fantastic for couples in distance because it allows them to, or couples with kids, right? So that you can have these conversations that are passcode protected without feeling like kids will kind of stumble onto that. But it's an important part of the marriage. So we do a lot of flirting, a lot of like sexy texts, I don't know. What would you add to that, Abe?
Well, the one thing too is that, and we kind of went over this a little bit earlier, but that anticipation, that buildup when you don't see each other is, and as fun as the phone sex is and everything else, when you finally do get together, it's like a honeymoon, like 3 days in a row. You're just like, can't keep your hands off each other, right? So that's the part about that. One of the benefits about a long distance relationship with commuter marriage is that you get these honeymoons that go on because you're so built up and can't wait to be connected with one another and to see one another and to touch one another, kiss one another, and all that. So
sex is never boring for us, or we never get in some rut of not having sex because it's like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in 3 weeks, I'm dying. You know what I mean? So it's like we're like animals. So it's great. It's super fun. So anticipation always lends to having fantastic sex life.
Yes,
definitely. Anything else you do that's creative that helps keep the intimacy alive and strong in your marriage?
I mean, I would say, one of the things the big bread and butters that we tell all of our listeners is like daily connections. You have to really be consistent. So Abe and I have a ton of fun with that. We're super flirty. We have all these creative ways we text. We do Google Duo videos too. Like I might do a silly video and send it to him, or anything, just like in life, like if you're walking around, you see something funny, I always take that chance to take a picture of it or something and send it to Abe. And so that we're just really involved to have regular connections in each other's life. So between the connections and then also having creative dates, and then what would be the other one? Always have our next trip on the books. Because that gives us the count. If you always have your next trip planned, and I always hate saying this for those international couples because some of them can't do that, but for those of you that can, always knowing the countdown of when you'll see each other next, that also is, to me, the other things that keep it alive.
Right. And I think also it's the creative aspect with the tools that you're using. So it doesn't always have to be the same stuff again and again, the same video again and again. And again, one of the things that endears me the most to Elaine is that when she does send me a video, she's never sent me a sexual anything over something like that, but it's the silliness of it, the randomness of it, how funny or creative or what it makes me like. It makes me drawn to her even more, and or surprising with a text that says, "Here's what I'm going to do to you next time I see you," kind of thing. That makes me like in the middle of the meeting go, "Oh my God," And so that kind of stuff is so fun.
I'm very mischievous, as you can tell.
And you've done that quite a bit, and so that part of it's fantastic and great. And so I would encourage those of you that do have to deal with distance, that be as creative as you can using those resources you have at your fingertips.
And can I end by saying to, Dan, we're talking about all the positives here, and we've talked a little bit about some of the negatives, but I don't want us to come across as being like, oh, we have it all together. We're just so creative all the time, because there are moments that are very difficult.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
There are dark days. Like I was chatting with you before the podcast, like weekends are harder for me, because my kids are older and his are still at home and needing a lot, and mine are off to college. So I have some really difficult times of loneliness. And one of the things that I learned early on is that it was important for me I could just be in that place and focus on that. And that is where it got difficult for me. And so I actually started making a list. And on that list, I started really writing out what are the positive components to our distance, so that when I was having a hard day, I go back and read that list and think about why it was worth it. And will allow myself to get back into that focus again. We actually have a podcast episode dedicated just to that. And we encourage all couples to make their own list of like, what are the components of this that are good, so that when you're having a hard time, yes, honor the bad and be honest about the bad and talk to each other about it, because it does impact your mental health. But then remember the good too. It's like we want to live in both spaces.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Well, we would just love if any of your listeners are in a commuter marriage. It's funny, Dan, sometimes people don't even know they're in a commuter marriage. You know what I mean? Because you don't hear the term that often. But if you're a couple that deals with distance in any component of your life, in your marriage, please follow us. Our podcast is Love is in the Air podcast. And I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. So as much as bringing in just our tips from our own life, I bring in a lot of the research, the leading relationship research, just on like healthy components of marriage too. And then Abe brings in all the inappropriate jokes. And
right.
That's my specialty.
Of course.
I've been studying that for 20 years or so. Really, spend a lot of time, at the university learning all the aspects of it.
What university is that? You went to clown school?
It's UBS.
UBS. I like it. That's good.
And I like that your logo for your podcast, it's called Love is in the Air, but it's an airplane. Get it?
Yeah.
It's up in the air. Yeah.
Yay. And we're on Instagram. Our support page is @Commuter Marriage Support. And then our podcast is Love is in the Air. It's on like all the major platforms. So
very good. Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having us, Dan.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Get Your Marriage On. And if you did, we would love it if you would take a few seconds to give us a rating on iTunes and to share the show with your friends. They'll thank you for life. Once you've done that, you can head over to getyourmarriageon.com for more resources about today's topic and to download our amazing marriage apps. Now go get your marriage on.